Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, I wanted to bring back and talk about the chart on the inauguration day that just occurred January 20th of 2021. And the reason why I wanted to bring this back up is so many people are asking questions about this chart because originally I have said, and many astrologers who know that on that day, Mars and Uranus exactly conjoined, we all talked about violence, sudden unexpected events, and nothing happened. And what I want you to know, first of all, is that the reason why we want to know astrology is to prevent things. We do not, it's nothing set in stone. We have free will. So when we see things like this, we take precaution to avert and avoid things. And guess what? Because of so much security and preparation, the problem was averted. And they did a lot. 25,000 National Guardsmen came to protect the Capitol during inauguration. That's what they needed to do. As an astrologer looking at this chart, it represents danger, but it was averted because Mars and Uranus exactly conjoined on that day. But here's another issue. This is a birth chart. And when you have a birth chart, it reflects the whole cycle of what that birth is about. So this is about the 4-year cycle of the presidency for Biden. So just like any birth chart, whether it's for yourself or the beginning of a business or the beginning of a marriage, it represents something about the whole chart, what it's about, the life of this entity, which is the 4-year cycle for the president. So I have to say, with Mars and Uranus exactly conjunct in Aries, let me remind you, Aries is a sign that is fast, action-oriented, very impulsive, very impatient. And Mars is extremely strong in this sign because it rules Aries. And then on top of it, Uranus makes it very unpredictable. So I have to say there's going to be many unpredictable events that will occur in this presidency. And another thing, because of this violent nature of this combination, there could be violence, there could be war or something that's predicted for this 4-year presidency with that. So you see, it is a birth chart. It's not that something happens on the day that it begins, but it reflects the whole 4 years. So I've got the chart up here. This is the inauguration chart, and I've already done a video on this, and you can reflect back. I did a video before we knew who the president was going to be. So I'm going to recap some of the things talking about it now that we know who the president is, but I want you to take this into consideration that anything can be averted most of the time. But let me talk about some of the features in this chart so we can get a better sense and feel of what this next 4 years will be like. So the first thing that stands out when I look at this chart, notice where Rahu and Ketu are. They have all the planets on one side of Rahu and Ketu. This is called the Kala Sarpa Yoga. And remember, Rahu and Ketu deal with a certain degree of destiny. This chart is full of intensity because what happens when you have the Kala Sarpa Yoga, any of the yogas that you have in the chart are intensified for good and bad, extremes. So this is an extremely eventful, extremely intense, and event-oriented inauguration or presidency. Because of this Kala Sarpa, it means it's trapped within the cycles of karma of Rahu and Ketu. There's a trap. And many times It can deal with major highs and major lows and comebacks. But let me just say, this is one of the most extreme times to be a president ever. So then I'm looking at that stellium of planets, all in Capricorn. So what do we have? Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Sun, all in Capricorn. And I want you to know that Saturn and Jupiter are pretty close to the Sun, which means they're combust. They are weakened, but let me just say Saturn is so strong. Saturn's like the defining point, the focal point of this chart, because the planets will disposit to Saturn. The only planet that doesn't is Mars. So Saturn and Mars are so intensely tied together because they're in their own sign. They're extremely strong, but they're in a square. So there are definite hardships and obstacles to be overcome with Mars being in square position to Saturn. It's tough. So there's going to be some setbacks, delays, and obstacles. That's what I find when I find a Saturn-Mars combination. Now, Rahu is aspecting them. Rahu is trining these planets, and this is positive because this means there's going to be some definite gains and definite transitions with the economy, with all the things that have been broken because of the coronavirus. There's going to be some major rebuilding and comebacks. Saturn's strong. Saturn gives a strength. But you know, interestingly enough, Saturn being the focal point as it is, represents old. And our president is older than most because that's old age, maturity. I think that's kind of interesting to realize that feature. But when I really want to get to the bottom of what the results are going to be about in a chart, of course, you'll have to continue to look at where the transits are moving as they aspect all of these other planets within the next 4 years. But looking at the dispositing planets really gives you an answer of where things are going. And as I said, the sign dispositors are pretty much Saturn and Mars. Well, Venus is here, in this chart, Venus is here in Sagittarius. So Venus is kind of out of the loop with all these other planets, and it relates to Jupiter by being in Sagittarius. So Venus kind of gives this freedom. And Venus does deal with financial matters, which means, you know, things can come back. But I will say this, Sagittarius can be a very opinionated sign. It is the truth seeker. And it's in the nakshatra of Purva Ashada, which means really the truth bearers in going to find the truth. So that's going to be one of the issues that bears hard on this presidency, finding truth, getting to the bottom of things. But let's go to the nakshatra dispositors, because I find that Mars, Moon, and Uranus are all in the nakshatra Ashwini. And Ashwini moves fast. It deals with travel many times. Uranus being in that nakshatra could deal with the dangers of travel too during this presidency. But Ashwini is ruled by Ketu. And when I look at where Ketu is, it goes to the 8th house. And Rahu is in the 2nd house in this chart. So financial matters are of major importance throughout this presidency, getting financial matters back to normal, balancing. But when I see the dispositing planet of Mars, Moon, and Uranus, Ketu going to the 8th house, makes me wonder about 8th house matters, which can deal with scandals. It can deal with research, analysis, and being in Scorpio, that can be healing. Healing, getting to the core and the bottom of things. Scorpio in the 8th house, K2, finding new ways of healing. That is profound and powerful, but it still deals with corruption and scandals being in the 8th house, particularly around money. Remember, the 8th house is other people's money. And then when I go to the Navamsha, which is very important, very, very important, we have to look at the Navamsha chart to see where everything is going. So let's put up the Navamsha here so you can see what I'm talking about. So remember, the Navamsha is called the fruit of the tree. And what that essentially means that where will what the charts promise bear fruit? And what will that fruit be? So because we're really dealing with the government, we're dealing with a presidency, when we look to this, I would think we look to the 10th house. And my goodness, from the birth chart, the 10th house is extraordinary with Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Sun, all in Capricorn in the 10th house. That is powerful. And there's a major hard amount of work to be fulfilled, which it will. But when I look to the Navamsha, where is that going? And I go to the 10th house. I see Mars and Uranus are in the 10th house. Boy, that's pretty action-packed because Mars is energy and action. But with Uranus, it is dangerous. It just is. And they're in the sign of Cancer, which Mars in Cancer is debilitated. It is weakened, it's harmed, it's problematic when it's in that sign. And when I look to the dispositing planet of the 10th house in the Navamsha, and it's the ruler of the 10th, plus it's the dispositor of both Mars and Uranus, it's the moon, because the moon rules Cancer. And the thing that really stands out in this chart, that kind of revibrates what is saying in the birth chart, is the moon is in the 8th house, ruler of the 10th with Neptune. There are a lot of secrets that are about to be uncovered. Let's just hope that it has more to do about health and healing than corruption and money. But this is all a possibility. The Navamsha is vitally important to look at when you're looking at the outcome of any chart. In India, they would never dream of looking at a chart without looking at the Navamsha. And there is a lot to be said about this Navamsha. So one more thing, because of that, the 8th house is the house that can deal with endings. And you see this reference point from Mars, Moon, Uranus. The dispositing nakshatra is Ketu and goes to the 8th house. Then when you go to Mars, Uranus, in the 10th house of the Navamsha, the sign dispositing planet, the moon, goes to the 8th house, and it's with Neptune. I think a lot is going to be uncovered. And remember, the 8th house does deal with endings. So I had said originally, not knowing who the next president would be, that they may not finish their term because of all this 8th house energy. So we'll see. We'll see if the read on these planets and the houses and signs pan out what the astrology is telling me about this inauguration chart. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, or you would like to get my free newsletter, go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. Or if you would like to learn Vedic astrology, go to my university website. I have a stellar university that teaches Vedic astrology. I would love to have you come join us. Go to University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.